You know what's weird? At 83, I realized that everything that really matters in life can be learned in 3 lessons. 3. And I've lived long enough to fill libraries with stories. But if you ask me what's really worth passing on, there are only 3 things, and almost no one talks about them. If you're watching this video, you're probably looking for some kind of answer. Maybe you're confused about where your life is headed. Or maybe you're just curious to hear what an 83-year-old man has to say after being around for so long. Whatever the reason, I'm glad our paths crossed today. My name is Carlos. I was born in 1941, right in the middle of World War II. I grew up in difficult times, but I also saw the world change in ways no one could have imagined. I lived long enough to see man walk on the moon and to send instant messages from my cell phone to my grandchildren on the other side of the world. I got married twice. I lost people I loved. I said yes a lot when I should have said no. And I said no a lot when I should have embraced life with a big yes. But today I don't want to talk about technology or how everything has changed. I want to talk about what remains, what I have found to be true regardless of time, culture, or age. When I was 20, I thought I knew everything. At 40, I realized I knew nothing. At 60, I began to understand some things. And now, at 83, I finally understand that life is simple. We are the ones who complicate it. The first thing, and perhaps the most important thing, I've learned in these 83 years is that relationships are everything. Absolutely everything. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a Tuesday in December. I was 52 years old, and I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by work papers. My son Ricardo had called me that morning. "Dad, are we going fishing?" "This weekend, just the 2 of us." I looked at that pile of documents, at the clock, thought about the deadlines, the meetings on Monday. "Son, it's not going to happen. I need to finish this project. I'll do it next time, I promise." At that moment, a voice inside me said, "You're making a mistake. Go with your son." But I ignored that voice. After all, I was a responsible man, and my work was important. My career was at its peak. Do you know how many times I fished with my son after that? None. Not because we didn't want to, but because life followed its course. Richard moved to another country 2 months later. He got an incredible opportunity in Europe. We saw each other once a year, sometimes less. The conversations became superficial, predictable. How is work going? How are the kids? We never again had that sacred space that only exists when 2 people share a moment without rushing, without distractions. What I didn't understand at the time is that when we say no to a moment of connection, we're not just postponing an encounter. We're unknowingly closing a door that may never open. The same way again. Money, I made a lot. I lost a lot too. Positions, I had several. Professional recognition, more than I deserved, probably. But at 83 years old, sitting on the porch of my house, do you know what warms my heart? They are the memories of real connections. The knowing looks exchanged with my wife over the decades. The smell of my daughter's hair when she was little and fell asleep on my lap. The deep conversations with true friends. The difficult reconciliations. The I love yous said in time. And you know what hurts me? It's the moments I missed. The times I was physically present but mentally absent. The family dinners I kept, checking the clock. The birthday parties I missed because something important came up at work. The stupid fights that lasted for years because my pride was bigger than my love. If I could give just one piece of advice to someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or even 60s, it would be, invest relentlessly in your relationships. Not the superficial ones, the hundreds of friends on social media. I'm talking about the deep relationships, those 5 or 6 that really matter. Be fully present when you're with them. Listen, really. Not to respond, but to understand. Say the hard things with love. Ask for forgiveness quickly. Forgive even faster. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, as my grandmother used to say. When I was 49, I had a terrible argument with my father. It was about politics. Imagine arguing about politics. He had his old-fashioned views, and I thought I knew better than him. We exchanged harsh words. I slammed the door and decided I wouldn't come back until he apologized. A week later, I got the connection no one wants to get. My father had suffered a massive stroke. When I arrived at the hospital, he was already gone. Forever. I could never look him in the eye again. I could never tell him that despite our differences, I loved him deeply. I could never tell him that I admired his integrity, his work ethic, his unconditional love for our family. Do you know what I would do to have 5 more minutes with my father? Anything. Absolutely anything. But 5 minutes cost a lot when they're gone. The second lesson that took me decades to learn is that everything passes, the good and the bad. And that completely changes how we should live. When something good happens, we celebrate, but we rarely stop to really soak in the moment, to feel the joy deeply, to tell ourselves, this is a moment I will cherish forever. And when something bad happens, it feels like it will last forever. The pain feels permanent. The failure feels final. The loss feels unbearable. But it isn't. In 1987, I lost almost everything in a bad investment. My wealth, which had taken me 20 years to build, was gone in a matter of weeks. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my head in my hands, thinking, this is it. I'm ruined. How am I going to look my family in the eye? How am I going to start over at 46? In that dark night of the soul, I thought about giving up. Literally. The feeling of shame was so great, so suffocating, that the idea of no longer existing seemed for a moment a relief. How stupid I was all I could think. How could I have been so arrogant, so careless? My wife Teresa came into the room and sat down next to me without saying anything. She just held my hand. After a while, she said something that changed everything. Carlos, this is just a chapter in our story. It's not the end of the book. It took me weeks to really understand what she meant, months to believe it, and years to confirm that she was absolutely right. 5 years after that terrible day, I had not only rebuilt my financial life, but I had learned lessons I never would have learned had I not lost everything. I became more humble, more cautious, more grateful. And most of all, I understood that my value was not in my assets, that I was not my job, nor my possessions, nor my status. The same principle applies to good things. When my first grandson was born, I was already 65 years old. I was wiser, more present. I remember holding him in my arms for the first time in the hospital and consciously thinking, this moment is sacred. I will breathe every second of this moment. And I breathed. I felt the weight of that little body. I noticed the perfection of his little fingers. I absorbed the indescribable smell of a newborn. I recorded the sound of his breathing, and I thanked, from the bottom of my soul, for being alive to witness that miracle. Today, my grandson is 18 years old. He is almost a man. But that moment remains alive within me, as real as if it were today. This is how we should live each precious moment, fully present, fully grateful, fully aware that it will pass. Awareness of impermanence does not diminish joy, it amplifies it. Likewise, when pain comes, and it always does, we can face it knowing that it too will pass. Not denying the pain, not running away from it, but going through it with the certainty that there is another side. When Teresa died 7 years ago, I thought I wouldn't survive. 52 years together. More than half a century of sharing. A life. When she left, I felt like half of me was gone too. In the first few months, the pain was physical. I woke up every day with a heaviness in my chest, an emptiness in my stomach. How am I going to go on? I asked myself every morning. But I kept going, one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. And though I never stopped missing you, the sharp pain slowly turned into something else, into gratitude for the years we had, into a deep certainty that our love transcends death, into small moments when I can still feel your presence, hear your laughter, remember your touch. The pain didn't go away, it transformed. It integrated itself into my life in ways I never could have imagined, and that too is a kind of miracle. So the second lesson is this: always remember that everything passes, the joys and the sorrows, the triumphs and the failures, the loves and the losses. Nothing is permanent, and that is scary, but it is also liberating, because it means that we must deeply cherish the good times and not despair in the bad times. Life is a succession of seasons. No winter, however brutal, lasts forever. And no spring, however glorious, lasts indefinitely. The beauty lies in recognizing each season for what it is and extracting from it its deeper meaning. The third and final lesson is perhaps the simplest, but also the most difficult to practice. The meaning of life is to give meaning to life. For most of my life, I have searched for a higher purpose, something that would explain everything. As a young man, I looked to religion, then to philosophy, later to work and achievement. I have spent decades searching for definitive answers. And you know what I discovered? That there is no single answer, that each of us needs to create our own meaning. There's a story I love about an old rabbi who always carried 2 pieces of paper, one in each pocket. On the paper in his right pocket was written, "The universe was created for you." On the paper in his left pocket, "You are but dust and ashes." And he said that wisdom lies in knowing when to read each one. We are at once insignificant and extraordinary. Our lives are but a brief flash in the history of the cosmos, and yet each of us carries within us an entire universe of possibilities, experiences, and meanings. When I understood this, really understood it, not just intellectually, but viscerally, I stopped looking for the meaning of life out there and started creating it through my daily choices. At age 70, after retiring, I went through a deep crisis. Who was I without my work? What was my value now? Why wake up every morning? It was then that I discovered gardening, something so simple. I started planting flowers, then vegetables, feeling the earth in your fingers, observing the miracle of seeds that sprout, grow, flower, and bear fruit, working in partnership with the sun, the rain, the seasons. And something extraordinary happened. In those moments in the garden, completely absorbed in what I was doing, I found a peace that no philosophy or religion had ever given me. A deep sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than myself, without needing to fully understand what that something bigger was. My granddaughter Clara, who was 6 years old at the time, asked me one day while she was helping me plant tomatoes, "Grandpa, why do you like gardening so much?" And I answered without thinking much, "Because when I'm in the garden, I feel part of life." I think that's the essence of the third lesson. Meaning is not something we find, but something we create through meaningful connections with people, with nature, with ideas, with causes greater than ourselves. There is no universal meaning that works for everyone. There is your meaning, that which makes your eyes shine, that which makes you lose track of time, that which, even on the most difficult days, makes you think, yes, this is why it is worth being alive. For some, it's in their children and grandchildren. For others, it's in art or science. For others, it's in service to others. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you discover it. And that usually happens not when we're searching for big answers, but when we're fully engaged in the present moment. Did you know that I spent almost my entire life worried about the future? What would people think of me? How would I live up to expectations? Today, looking back, I see how much time and energy I wasted on worries that never came true, on ghosts that only existed in my mind, on trying to control the uncontrollable. If I could go back in time, I would tell young Carlos, relax, be present. Life is now, not in some imaginary future where everything will be perfect. When I was 75, I was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. Doctors gave me 6 months to live. I proved them wrong. Here I am, 8 years later. But that diagnosis was one of the greatest gifts I have ever received. It seems strange to say that, doesn't it? How can a terminal diagnosis be a gift? Because that was when I truly understood, in the cells of my body, that our time is finite, that each day is precious, that we cannot postpone life. In those first few days after my diagnosis, after the initial shock, I experienced a clarity I had never felt before. Suddenly, everything that was truly important became crystal clear, and everything that was superfluous, the petty worries, the little grudges, the everyday irritations, simply disappeared. I began to live as if each day were my last, not frantically or desperately, but with a quiet intensity, a keen awareness of each moment, a deep gratitude for each dawn. I began writing letters to my children and grandchildren, sharing memories, lessons, feelings that I had never fully expressed. I reconciled with people with whom I had broken off relationships. I asked for forgiveness. I forgave. I said, I love you much more often. And instead of giving in to fear and sadness, I decided to plant trees. Trees I probably wouldn't see growing. Trees for future generations. It was an act of hope, of faith in the continuity of life, of recognition that I am just a link in a much larger chain. Through a set of circumstances that doctors can't fully explain, the cancer went into remission. I was given what I call extra time, and each day of that extra time is a miracle for which I am deeply grateful. But the lesson remains. Live as if each day matters, because it does. So these are the 3 most important things I've learned in 83 years. Relationships are everything. Everything passes, the good and the bad. And the meaning of life is to give meaning to life. Simple to say, hard to really internalize. A lifetime of practice. You who are watching me now, whatever your age, 20, 40, 60, probably think you have a lot of time ahead of you, and I sincerely hope you do. But the truth is, we never know. What I do know is that when we reach the end of our journey, we won't regret the meetings we didn't go to, the emails we didn't respond to, the things we didn't buy. We'll regret the love we didn't express, the forgiveness we didn't extend, the gratitude we didn't show, the time we didn't spend with the people who truly matter. There's a question I ask myself every morning when I wake up. If this were my last day, would I live this way? And if the answer is no too many times in a row, I know I need to change something. It's not about drama or grand gestures. It's about authenticity, about living in alignment with what we truly value, about consciously choosing each day how we want to spend this finite and precious resource that is our time on this earth. The beauty of life lies in its fragility, in its impermanence, in the fact that nothing is guaranteed. Each dawn is a gift, each encounter, an opportunity, each challenge, an invitation to grow. So, my young friend, yes, to me, you are young, no matter your age. Take these words, not as the absolute truth, but as reflections of someone who has lived long enough to learn a few things along the way. Cultivate your relationships as if they were precious gardens. Be fully present in the joys, knowing that they are fleeting, and in the sorrows, knowing that they will also pass. And find what gives meaning to your existence, not what others expect of you, but what makes your heart sing. Life is short, terribly short, but also incredibly rich in possibilities, in everyday miracles, in opportunities to love and be loved. There is a phrase I heard many years ago that has become a kind of mantra for me. In the end, what matters is not the years in your life, but the life in your years. May you live each of your years, however many or few, with presence, with purpose, with love. May you look back as I do now and say, it wasn't perfect, but it was authentic. It was mine. And it was worth every second. Thank you for listening to me today, for giving me the privilege of sharing a little bit of my journey with you. Remember, relationships are everything. Everything passes. And the meaning of life is to give meaning to life. Now go live. Intensely. Authentically. As if each day were, at the same time, the first and the last of your life. Because in a way, it is. You know, I could stop here. These 3 lessons would be enough for a fulfilling life. But I want to go further and share some practical examples of how I applied these lessons in the most challenging phases of my life. When I lost my wife, Teresa, I was completely lost. It was as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. We had been sleeping together for 52 years. We had coffee together every morning. We commented on the news in the newspaper. We laughed at the same jokes. Suddenly, I was alone in the same house, surrounded by objects that reminded me of her at every moment. The first few months were pure survival, waking up, breathing, doing the basics, sleeping, and doing it all again the next day. It was my grandson Miguel who, without knowing it, showed me the way back. One day he showed up at my house with a photo album. "Grandpa, should we look at Grandma's photos?" he asked, with that childlike innocence. My first impulse was to say no. Looking at those pictures would be like poking an open wound. But something made me accept it, and it was transformative. Instead of focusing on the loss, we spent the afternoon celebrating her life. Each photograph was a window into a moment of joy, love, and life. "Tell me that story, Grandpa," Miguel would ask, and I would tell her, and we would laugh, and sometimes we would cry too. But most of all, we kept Teresa alive in our memories and hearts. I realized that pain is not the opposite of love. Pain is the continuation of love when the person is no longer physically present. And that avoiding pain means, in a way, denying the love we feel. This was a powerful example of the second lesson. Everything passes. But that doesn't mean forgetting. It means transforming. The acute pain of loss gradually gave way to a sweet longing, a deep gratitude for everything we experienced together. And also from the first lesson, relationships are everything. Even after the person leaves, what we built together remains. The memories, shared values, the love that transcends time and space. Another important situation was when I had to move to a smaller house. After almost 40 years in the same house, where I raised my children, welcomed grandchildren, and built memories, I had to get rid of many objects, furniture, books, material memories. At first, it was painful. Each object seemed to have a story, a memory associated with it. How did you choose what to take and what to leave behind? That's when I applied the third lesson. The meaning of life is to give meaning to life. I realized that those objects had value only because of the meaning I attributed to them, and that the true meaning was within me, not in things. I then began photographing each important object before I got rid of it. And most importantly, I began writing down the stories associated with them. The armchair, where I read stories to my children. The watch my father gave me when I graduated. The seashell collection Teresa and I collected on our travels. I realized that what I really wanted to preserve was not the objects, but the stories, the meaning, and that I could do it without carrying all the material weight. It was liberating. Instead of seeing that change as a loss, I began to see it as an opportunity to simplify my life, to focus on what really matters. And something unexpected happened. The fewer things I had, the more mental and emotional space I gained. more freedom for new experiences, new relationships, new meanings. Another time these lessons proved valuable was when, at age 77, I decided to learn how to use a computer and the internet. My grandchildren had been insisting for years, but I resisted. "I'm too old for that," was my excuse. Until one day, my granddaughter Anna told me something that touched my pride. "Grandpa, you always said that it's never too late to learn, that life is made of challenges. You were the one who taught me that." She was right, of course. I was contradicting my own values. And so, reluctantly at first, I began to learn. It was frustrating at first. My hands weren't as nimble. My memory wasn't what it used to be. I felt stupid when I couldn't do something that seemed so simple to my grandchildren. But I persisted. One day at a time. One lesson at a time. And something wonderful happened. Not only did I develop a new skill, but I discovered a whole world that had been closed to me. I started video chatting with distant relatives. I started researching gardening and trying out new techniques. I started watching documentaries about places I had always dreamed of visiting. Most importantly, that challenge gave me a new purpose, a new meaning. And it reinforced my belief that it's never too late to grow, to learn, to reinvent yourself. It was a living example of the third lesson. The meaning of life is to give meaning to life. Each new learning, each new challenge, each new connection was a way to create meaning, to stay engaged in life, to continue to grow even when my body was starting to show signs of wear and tear. One of the most surprising discoveries for me was realizing how these three lessons intertwine, how each reinforces and expands on the others. For example, when we invest in deep relationships, lesson 1, we find that they help us get through difficult times by reminding us that this too shall pass, lesson 2. And these same relationships are often the most powerful source of meaning in our lives, lesson 3. Likewise, when we truly internalize that everything passes, second lesson, we become more present in relationships, first lesson, and more aware that we need to actively create meaning in each day that is given to us, third lesson. And as we seek to create meaning, lesson 3, we inevitably turn to meaningful connections, lesson 1, and develop a wiser relationship with the impermanence of all things, lesson 2. It is as if these three lessons form a sacred triad, a perfect triangle where each vertex supports and amplifies the others. Of course, knowing these things intellectually is very different from living them daily. Even at 83, I still find myself forgetting these truths. I still get distracted by the trivial. I still cling to things that don't really matter. I still put off meaningful connections. I still fear change and loss. We are human, after all, imperfect, contradictory, constantly learning. But the difference is that now, when I realize I'm drifting away from those truths, I can return more quickly. I have a more calibrated internal compass, a clearer sense of what really matters. This doesn't mean that life has gotten easier. It just means that it's become more authentic, more aligned with my deepest values, with what really matters in the end. And perhaps this is the true privilege of aging. Clarity, the ability to separate the essential from the superfluous, to distinguish what remains from what is fleeting. When I look back over the long road I have traveled, I see many mistakes, many detours, many falls. I see times when I was less than I could have been, when I failed people I loved, when I lost myself in trivial concerns. But I also see beauty, I see love, I see growth. I see moments of perfect communion with life, when everything seemed to make sense, even in the midst of pain or uncertainty. And if there is a fourth lesson I would like to share, it is this: forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for your mistakes, for your failures, for the times when you were less than you would have liked to have been. Not to justify behaviors that hurt other people, but to free yourself from the burden of merciless self-criticism. Because forgiveness of ourselves and others is what allows us to start over, reinvent ourselves, grow through our mistakes instead of getting stuck in them. And there is no such thing as too late. As long as there is life, there is the possibility of a new beginning, of a new understanding, of a reparation, of a reconnection. So, my dear friend who is watching me, I hope that these reflections from an 83-year-old man can in some way illuminate your path. Not so that you avoid your own mistakes, because everyone needs to make their own journey, but so that perhaps you make mistakes different from mine. And most importantly, so that you value what really matters while there is still time. Because time, that mysterious entity that governs our lives, is the most precious resource we have. And it is the only one we cannot recover, we cannot buy, we cannot trade. Every second that passes is a second that will never come back. Every missed opportunity to say, I love you, to hug the one we love, to contemplate a sunset, to feel gratitude, to create something meaningful, is an opportunity that disappears forever. Therefore, the question we should ask ourselves is not, how much time do I have? But, what am I doing with the time I have? When I was 35, I lived on autopilot. I woke up, went to work, came home, went to sleep, and did it all again the next day. I lived for the future, for the next promotion, for the next acquisition, for the next achievement. One day, a coworker, only a few years older than me, died suddenly of a heart attack. We were talking in the hallway at work on a Friday, and by Monday he was gone. Just like that, without warning. It shook me to my core. For the first time, I confronted my own mortality viscerally, not as an abstract concept. I realized that I too could leave at any moment, that there were no guarantees. For a few weeks I lived more consciously, more present, more grateful, more connected to who and what really mattered. Then, unfortunately, the routine swallowed me up again. The autopilot was reactivated. The illusion that I had all the time in the world returned stealthily, and I continued to postpone life for a future that had no guarantee of arriving. I needed many other lessons, many other losses, many other scares to really internalize this truth. The time is now. Life is now. There is no other guaranteed moment other than the one we are living. At 83, when I look back on my days, I try to ask myself, am I using the time I have left well? Not in the sense of productivity or accomplishment, but in the sense of presence, of connection, of meaning. I try not to waste energy on old resentments, on worries about things I can't control, on regrets I can't change. Instead, I focus on what I can still do, the connections I can still nurture, the love I can still give and receive, the beauty I can still see, the meaning I can still create. And you know what? This awareness of finitude does not make life sadder or darker. On the contrary, it makes each moment more precious, more intense, more alive. When we truly understand that our time is limited, we stop wasting it on things that don't matter. We stop postponing what we really want to experience. We stopped saving the best for later. My mother had a set of very fine English china, a family heirloom, but it was so precious that it was only used on special occasions. Special here meant practically never. Those beautiful pieces were kept, protected, preserved. For what? When my mother passed away, almost the entire set was intact, unused. What a waste of beauty. I learned from this not to save the best for later, not to postpone joy, not to save love, attention, presence, to use fine china for breakfast on a regular day if that brings pleasure. Why put off life for a special moment when we can make this moment something special? This is a question I ask myself daily, and also to you who are listening to me now. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't think these 3 lessons, or 4, if we include that last reflection on time, are the magic formula for a perfect life. There is no such thing. What exists is a journey, a continuous exploration, a constant learning. until the last breath. So my dear friend who is watching me, I thank you for your attention, your patience, your willingness to listen to the reflections of this old man who is still learning, still growing, still discovering what it means to be alive. If anything I've shared today resonated with you, if a single word stuck in your heart, then my purpose has been fulfilled. Because at the end of the day, that's what life is all about. Connections, shared moments, past wisdom, hearts, touching hearts, even through a screen. Thank you for this moment, for this connection, for this opportunity to give meaning to my existence through sharing. And always remember, relationships are everything. Everything passes. And the meaning of life is to give meaning to life. And all this happens now, in this exact moment that you are living. Not in the past, which is already gone. Not in the future, which is uncertain. But now, always now. Take good care of your now. It's the only moment that really exists. Oh, and one last thing, which is perhaps the most important of all. It is never too late to start living by these truths. Never. As long as you breathe, there is the possibility of transformation, of growth, of reconnecting with what really matters. If I, at 83 years old, am still learning, still growing, still transforming, so can you. Regardless of your age, your history, your past mistakes. Every dawn is a new opportunity. Every breath is a new chance. Every heartbeat is a new beginning. Don't waste your beats. Make every one of them count. Because in the end, the question will not be how long we lived, but how fully we lived the time we had. And that, my friend, is entirely in your hands. Now, I'm Carlos, 83 years old, still learning, still growing, still loving, and grateful for every moment of this extraordinary journey called life. Thank you for sharing some of your time with me today. May you find wisdom, love, and purpose in every step of your path. I believe in you. I believe in your ability to live a full, authentic, and meaningful life. Believe in yourself, too. A big hug from this old heart, which continues beating, feeling, loving, and hoping that its words have in some way touched yours.